Welcome, dear students, to this session on village studies in India. Dear students, in the last session, we have discussed the various perspectives of different thinkers on villages. And in this session, we will go through the biography and contributions of M. Srinivas to Indian sociology and village studies. The early life and education. We will begin with the early life and education of M. Srinivas. Mysore Narasimhacharya Srinivas, commonly known as M. Srinivas, was born on the 16th of November 1916 in a Brahmin family in Mysore. He lived a fruitful life and died at the age of 83 on the 30th of November 1999. In 1943, he started working as a research assistant at the University of Mumbai. He was a brilliant student and received multiple fellowships for his studies both nationally and internationally. He was associated with Professor Gure, head of the Department of Sociology, Mumbai, working on the field trips for data collections and research work. Srinivas worked at the University of Baroda from 1951 to 1959 and later joined the University of Delhi in 1959 and served as a visiting professor at the University of Manchester and travelled abroad. He worked at the Institute of Social and Economic Change from May 1972 to Jan 79. Later, he worked as a visiting professor in various international and national institutes. His varied knowledge and experience had added immensely to the world of sociology in India. He is a pioneer in the field of sociology, having introduced prominent concepts to the field of study. The essential books on Indian society by M. Srinivas are Marriage and Family in Mysore 1972, Religion and Society among the Coors of South India 1952, Caste in Modern India and Other Essays 1964, Society Change in Modern India, The Remembered Village, India's Village 1955, edited by Srinivas. Dimensions of Social Change in India. Professor Srinivas was an active member of several institutions and worked hard to keep his commitment with the various institutions that were very carefully selected to be a part of. Professor Srinivas was known for his concept of Sanskritization in 1962 and Westernization in 1966. Srinivas has used these concepts to discuss the social change in India. These concepts discuss the structure of Indian society and do not look to the change in the structure of society. We will look at the social system of the Mysore village. Rampura is one of the largest caste-based village in the plains of Mysore. It is a well-structured village with an average of 19 Hindu castes and Muslims. It is a village which accommodated both the religion in the same village. Each caste was known for its traditional occupations. Most people followed the traditional occupations of their caste. However, some also followed the other occupations that were not particular to their caste, but was only attractive due to the economic gains. Some of the non-traditional occupations were more income generating than the traditional occupations. Villagers take pride in their traditional occupation, and if they try another or alternate occupation, people look at them with an expression that conveys, "Oh, you know this work also," while some will seek to find fault with them and accuse them of avoiding their regular occupation. However, change is constant, as the traditional occupations are not always economically viable. People are forced to change their profession. This change in profession is not seen in the lower caste group, who continue to do their own traditional occupations. To better understand this situation, let us look at the table. We will look at the traditional occupation versus alternate occupations and how the people react to this change of occupation. If traditionally there is a potter by occupation and he chooses to do agriculture, then the reactions of the villagers would be either of surprise, some would be envious that he is also doing agriculture, the others would say that he is not spending enough of time in pot making. We will look at another example of the Brahmin who is supposed to be doing priestly duties. If he engages in agriculture, then the reaction of people around would be varied. Some people would be surprised that a priest can do agriculture. There would be others who are envious of him to say a priest is earning more money through agriculture. You would have yet another set of people who would say the priest is not engaging in the priestly duties, not spending enough of time in the rituals, religious rituals, and spending more time in agriculture. So, you would always have a mixed reaction of people when it comes to people changing their traditional duties and traditional occupation. So, it is very, very essential for us to see it in the whole sense of the economical viability of this occupational sustenance. It is very difficult to change the traditional occupation, though current days changes are happening. Most people have moved to alternate occupations. The very few people who still continue to stay with the traditional occupations continue to do so with an addition of other works that could be done through their traditional jobs. For example, the traditional oilman, besides being involved in oil extraction, is now also involved in trading and selling the oil by bottling it and trying to sell the oil to other places and increasing his market for the oil. The fisherman is not only catching fishes anymore, he is also engaged in selling fishes. The traditional occupations are not so rigidly followed. Even the untouchables are now engaging in agricultural activities. The form of exchange for services is goods. However, there are instances when people have arguments or differences and the services are repaid with money. As the demand for money increased around the World War II, the villagers started trading in currency as it was more profitable. Trading in currency also gave villagers an opportunity to trade in non-traditional occupations, enabling the people to invest economically in lucrative occupations. Along with trading in currency, the right to hold on to the traditional occupation continued as part of inheritance. Families maintained monopoly over the traditional occupations. Most people invest in land. Once they have surplus money, and the amount of land they have determines their contribution to the village festival, and this will in turn enhance their status. So, a low caste person will go through the process of Sanskritization. The sheer number of the people in a caste group is important, as higher the number of people in a particular caste will make them the dominant caste. It is not the traditional profession that determines the position of the caste group as being dominant. The peasant group is more dominant in the Rampura village, and the elders in the dominant group are consulted for justice in cases not only from their own caste groups, but from other groups in the village as well. At times, the justice system of the dominant caste directs the other caste groups to take their own cases to their own caste courts, especially if the matter involves the fine rules of their caste. The dominant caste do respect the sentiments and customs of the minority caste groups. The dominant castes are also the spokesperson of the villagers and will decide whether or not to share information to the outside of the village. They act more as gatekeepers and will be selective in sharing of or concealing information about the people in the village. We will look at the caste hierarchy. The basic ideology of stratification is domination and subordination. The fact that the system of stratification exists shows that some caste group is higher and some are lower. In Rampura, the caste hierarchy does not exist, and the only basis on which you can differentiate the caste group is based on their marriage practices and their eating habits. People of the same caste group will marry only among their caste group and will dine only with their caste group. Besides this difference, there seems to be no differentiation and identification of different caste groups in Rampura. Stratification can exist only if the caste groups are separated. The separation of the caste groups should be clear and have specific categories of separation. In Rampura, the separation of the caste group is mainly through the endogamous practices of marriage. People of a particular caste group will marry only among their caste group. This form of separation exists and is one of the form of differentiation among caste groups. The other form of differentiation is commensality. People will eat only with their caste group members and members of the higher caste group. Eating with a lower caste person will lead to a person becoming impure and will call or require the person to go through a purification ceremony to be able to take part in their own caste group rituals. Women tend to follow commensality more than men. Men tend to eat with people of the other caste groups if their caste groups are considered equals, and hence shepherds and peasant men will eat together, but women will avoid and maintain their level of distance. In the village, there is a marked difference in the diet and the occupation of the various caste groups. There is a very clear demarcation based on the notion of purity and pollution. Vegetables are considered to be above the non-vegetarian food. Cattle is considered sacred for the Hindus. Hence, the cow and the bull is not eaten as food. People who eat beef are considered to be lower caste. The so-called untouchables usually eat the carcasses of dead animals and are considered to be unclean. The domestication of pigs goes above the eating of human waste and dirt, and hence eating a pig is considered to be very, very unclean. And even the fowl that runs or roams around in the village eating all the waste on its path is considered unclean for eating. Killing is a sin, and hence eating flesh is considered to be bad, as it involves killing an animal. Even though eating flesh is associated with the low caste, there are caste groups who will eat flesh and deny eating flesh so as to maintain their sanctity of their caste group. In similar ways, drinking alcohol is also considered to be a low behavior associated with the low caste, and yet very few will openly admit to consumption of alcohol. Caste groups trying to move up the ladder, it adapts the Brahmanical cultures, yet there will be others who observe such cultures in public, and yet in the closeness of their own homes they continue to eat meat. Eating meat is acceptable among some caste groups who eat mutton and will deny eating any other form of meat like domesticated pig, field rats and water snakes. Acknowledgement of eating such type of meat in public would lead to unwanted attention and discomfort among the peasants and people. Peasant groups in Rampura do drink alcohol and eat field rats, yet these facts are denied in public. There is a marked hierarchical difference based on the occupation of people. Leather work is the lowest in the rank as it involves skinning and tanning. The lower caste groups work with leather. Swine rearing is also considered as a low occupation as pigs are considered to be unclean and dirty. The butcher's job is also considered to be a low caste job as it involves killing of animals, and it is usually done by the Muslim community. Tapping toddy is also considered to be a profession of the lower caste and usually on the low caste people drink toddy. Drinking Western alcohol is considered a status symbol, and usually only the rich and the upper caste indulge in such practices. Ideally, even agricultural jobs are not meant for the Brahmins, as doing the ploughing, small insects would be killed and harmed. The non-Brahmins do the work in the field with the help of their servants. The job of the barberman and the washerman is extremely defined and unclean, as both these occupations involves working with the unclean hair and nails and soiled clothes, even clothes used during the menstrual cycle. The touch from a barber will defy the Brahmin, and hence he will have to go through a cleansing ritual before he enters his home and touches any of the items at home. It is important for the Brahmin to perform the simple purification ritual to get back to his regular routine of work. The clothes washed by a washerman is pure, yet not pure enough for the Brahmin, and there again a ritual of purification that are carried out to ensure purity of the race. Caste groups tend to claim higher positions based on their positions in the Varna system, where the Brahmins occupy a higher position, and the differentiation of the caste group is not based on their food habits and occupation. It is difficult to place the various caste groups in a hierarchical structure, and the Muslim communities are completely left out of this hierarchical structure. The peasant community holds a higher ranking based on the amount of land he owns and the sheer numerical size of the community, and also the amount of Sanskritization. Some people who changed their traditional occupation and have a higher land holdings and better economical status tend to occupy higher status in Rampura village. The caste structure in Rampura is in the process of constant change based on local factors that impact the hierarchical structure. The relationship of the Brahmins and the influential peasant is very different, as the peasant headman has powers related to matters that are non-religious and the Brahmin powers are religious. Yet both respect each other and there is a mutual respect for each other. The peasant communities share a relationship with the untouchables that can be described as being mutual or of being of necessity. The untouchables require a job for sustenance. The lower caste require a job for sustenance and survival, whereas the peasant need their jobs to be done. This relationship is long lasting and is carried on from generations, and the loyalty and dedication is visible in the service rendered by the lower caste. Over a period of time, the lower caste start taking an overtly close relationship with the peasant family members. The line of purity and pollution seems to be diluted and not so strongly followed. The peasants also have tenants in their property. The tenants tend to do the work for the landlords on their land and supposed to pay the landlords the returns from the harvest and the profits. This is a slightly different relationship where there is a contract involved, along with an obligation to give the landlord a share of the produce. There are times where the landlords are not available in the villages and are not in direct contact with the tenants, and this seems to be an ideal situation for the tenants, where their actions are not monitored on a regular basis. In case where the landlord is in the same vicinity or close by, he seems to keep the tenants always in a guarded position to ensure that their action does not make the landlords upset or annoyed. In spite of the various caste groups in the village and the internal difference, there is solidarity and unity among the various caste groups. In one caste group is involved in an illegal or unethical practices, the other caste group in the village will turn a deaf ear to such activities, as it does not affect the people in the village. It is okay to do such acts outside one's own village. These groups of people will be protected and shielded by their fellow villagers. In the village, if there was an epidemic or an outbreak of a contagious disease, the entire village moved to huts nearby, away from the villages until the spread of the disease is over. If a person with blood cancer died, then the person was not buried in the village, as the belief that the ground would be polluted and affect the yearly produce. The entrance to the village was usually not guarded on regular occasions, but during festive occasions, the entrance is well guarded and creates a boundary and divides the villages in terms of geographical spaces. We have come to the end of this session and I would like to summarize. In this session, we have seen how caste is an important identity among various caste groups. The caste hierarchy is very important and occupies a prominent position in understanding the society. The usual high caste need not occupy a high position, and the economical status plays a significant role in the position of the person. The caste occupies a status based on their occupation, and even if the occupation is illegal, the village supports the activities of the caste group as long as their activities is outside their village. The people also tend to imitate the high caste groups and their practices. The process of Sanskritization is very visible among caste groups trying to move up the caste ladder. Rampura village, unlike other villages, seem to follow a slightly different line of caste hierarchy, wherein the economical stable communities tend to occupy a better status in the village. The headman of the village is a person from the peasant community who is economically well to do and not the village priest. The priest does his priestly duties and does not interfere with the physical and economical affairs, while the headman takes care of the village affairs and avoids giving his suggestion in religious matters. The relationship of the people in the caste hierarchy varies and is very visible in the relationship of masters and servants. The low castes work as servants for generations with a particular master and over a period of time occupy a special relationship which is very special. This relationship is special because the servant becomes part of the family, yet knowing this position but not given more freedom and rights due to his long and faithful association with the master. The other relationship in the village is of the tenant and the landlord. The tenant seems happier if the landlord is not living in the village, and the tenant is not required to satisfy the landlord's demands regularly as goodwill. In Rampura, we find that caste groups occupy positions that are not similar to other villages, and yet they follow similarities in terms of hierarchy and concepts of purity and pollution.